Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm thrilled to be talking about the TV series The Z Suite. I'm joined today by actor and executive producer Lauren Graham, actor Nico Santos, and creator, writer, and showrunner Katie O'Brien. And Katie, starting with you, one of the things that immediately struck me about this series is that if you look at all of these characters, they're all people who feel like they're undervalued, underappreciated, and overlooked in some way, both kind of personally and professionally. And I was interested in how you took that into the writing and found the different ways that that looks, because obviously for Lauren's character, Monica, that looks very different to, Kriska, who's a social media manager who kind of feels like she has more to offer than she's being asked to do.
Yeah, I think there's something very real about working in a workplace. I think everybody feels undervalued and like they could be doing more or expressing themselves in a different way. And so I just really liked the idea of all of these people having very strong wants and trying the best that they could, but maybe not doing it perfectly. And so it really was just an exploration of all of these people want the same thing. Everybody wants to do a good job. They just have, certain things that are getting in the way of that. So that's sort of how it came about.
Yeah. And Lauren, in playing Monica, I love that you described the fact that you immediately saw her as someone who's really, really smart, but also a little bit unhinged. And obviously, once the rails fall off, things become very unhinged for her, but it doesn't come out of nowhere. That's always been kind of bubbling inside of her underneath the surface. And I was just interested in how you developed this character and having her be very smart and very accomplished, but still allowing for that other side to kind of seep in even before everything goes wrong.
Well, I wondered, and Katie and I talked quite a bit about what, how does this person get to where she is and yet make such a big mistake, and what is at stake for her? And I think it is, yes, she wants her job back, and yes, she's been replaced by a young person, and that's insulting. But it's really at this time of her career, of her life, it's what is her relevance, like what she's fighting for, her very being, in a way, for her importance and her sense of herself and her sense of women her age. And I just think she feels she probably came up in a company with not very many other women, so there's a lot at stake. And yet I think she does see a little bit of herself in Kriska. She wants these younger people to earn their spot and not just be given it. So there's a lot of reality, I feel, in that drives her to do some kooky things.
And Nico, in playing Doug, he's a creative partner, but also very much Monica's right hand. And so I wanted to ask you about the way in which you kind of found those spaces where he's very much there to elevate her and lift her up and support her, but also where you wanted him to kind of have his own autonomy and his own ideas and his own things to bring to the table.
Well, I mean, I really saw Doug as somebody who, for as talented as he is at his job, is a person who really doesn't have a lot of confidence and finds his light with Monica. And I described it as he's like the moon, you know, and he gets his light from Monica. And, I'm sure there's going to be an evolution if we get to keep telling these stories about how he will find his own light.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's the relationship. It's like he still doesn't trust himself. And so
nor does Monica want to be on her own. I mean, there may be a little more of a power play there, but she'd be lost without him.
Yeah, but they both know together they're solid.
Right. And the two of you have such a great rhythm together in terms of that partnership and moments where, they're in a client pitch meeting and they know who should start the sentence and who should finish it. And they're never talking over each other. And so how did you find that rhythm that they have with each other that really speaks to their history with one another?
I think it just fell into place naturally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just really trust Nico, and I have a lot of respect for his comedic sense,
for my silliness
of timing. Yes. And I just think it's like we're different instruments, but we kind of play well together. And I was saying to him, most of the people in my life, I've been friends for a really long time, and I don't know, he feels like one of those to me, even though we just met. So we just had a nice, it's lucky when you have that and you don't have to work too hard for it.
Yeah.
And then of course it's in the writing as well. We don't have to know exactly what their history is to feel that it's very rich.
Yeah, it was really great because when we were shooting, each of us sort of did a really good job of setting up something for the other person, and then the other one knocks it off the park. And I mean, that's the best way to work is when people meet you at your level and be like, can play around with you. Yeah.
I love that. And Katie, when it came to writing the partnership between these two characters, and, I think especially as they go through the grief of losing their job, they're not processing it at the same stages. And so how did you kind of always find the balance that you wanted them to have with one another at different points?
Yeah, these two really embodied the balance that I was trying to have in the writing. And it's interesting, you write something and you sort of imagine how these characters will be and sort of what their relationship will be. And then you get incredible actors to play those roles who heighten the writing so much and bring it to life in a way that you could have never imagined. And so I always wanted Monica and Doug to be true partners and be very, very smart, driven individuals, but also silly and fun and flawed in their own ways. And so when Nico and Lauren got together, it was sort of this really kismet thing where I just watched the two of them and I was like, oh my gosh, this is far better than I could have imagined or what is on the page. And that's just a testament to really great actors.
Yeah. And one of the details that I love is the fact that Monica has an exact replica of her office in the workplace inside of her apartment. And even just the fact that it's attached to the living room with the doors open, so it's not even a separate space, tells you so much. And Katie and Lauren, just wanted to ask you about those aspects of Monica where, you're really presenting this character who has given so much of herself and made so many sacrifices for her job to the point where it's become her full identity, even when she leaves the office.
I mean, that's just Katie's vision. I mean, that was probably one of the times where I was like, really?
Yeah, that's fair.
But I love it because, first of all, it's very original. It does tell you so much about the character. And I don't know, it's I think in the first season, you're finding your tone, you're finding what are the parameters of how big are we going. And I love that. And I loved equally being given the opportunity to also show, and it happens more in the later episodes, but show the vulnerable side of this person who's created an apartment like that, who you just keep kind of learning more about her. And it was just great fun.
And Nico, there's such a fun detail in the fact that Doug has such an affinity for Christmas to the point where he has an obsessive compulsiveness for building miniature Christmas villages. But I like that it kind of tells you a bit about his personality and the things that bring him joy. And so when you go through the script and you kind of mine for those sorts of details, how did something like that just add to the personality that you were already developing for him?
I mean, when Katie said that was going to be sort of one of his quirks, I was like, yes, absolutely. Why not? That's great. Let's run with that. But I thought it was a really great detail, and it did give me sort of like a pathway to finding Doug. And I was able to sort of like bring, my Filipino heritage into it because Filipinos are obsessed with Christmas. And I was like, this is going to work really well for Doug. So.
I think, Lauren, as well, you bring up such a great point about the first season of any new show, really figuring out the voice. And I think, especially with the comedic sensibility of this show, how big do you want it to be to make sure that it still feels very real and very grounded to these characters? And so for all three of you, just wanted to ask what that collaborative journey and those conversations looked like as you tried to figure that out throughout these episodes.
It just, it was a collaborative journey. It was conversations. It was trying different things. It was trusting each other. I just, I trust Katie. I trust our directing producer, Tristram Shapiro, who has great comedy taste. I tried to give options, I guess, and tonally and broad in terms of sort of big and small, and just loved the exploration and loved the conversation. And that's the whole deal with, wanting to be a producer, is just to be part of that conversation. Because you don't know. I mean, you're finding it along the way, and you just got to trust your partners, which I definitely do.
Yeah, it was really collaborative. I love improvising on a set. I think you get a lot of really amazing moments when you do that. And we were allowed that freedom. And they're not all gems, so sometimes they don't work. And Katie would be like, no. And other times we're like, okay, keep going that direction. So it was a lot of fun to sort of like see Katie steer the ship where she wanted to go.
I have to say, Katie is like the most enthusiastic, the most yes, and the most like try it, sure. Like than any other creator I've ever worked with, many of whom are more invested in getting, in being right, or in being say it this way, do it like, the way I want it. And she just had a remarkable amount of generosity, which was also really fun.
That's really easy, though, when you have really talented people who are much smarter than you. I mean, that really is, I think the trick is like surrounding yourself with really, really talented people who, like Lauren said, have really great taste. Then you trust them to try anything, because if you surround yourself with really talented people, it's like, well, this will only get better with their ideas and their thoughts. And so it becomes really easy to be collaborative. I just think that's a better way to work. I like collaborating.
Katie, I also wanted to ask you about the writing all the dialogue and the language, because it feels like that was probably a very specific exercise, especially given the themes and the topics of, where these two generations bring different ideas and different approaches to the table. And so how did you set about going through the dialogue and always kind of thinking very specifically about the language, the slang and the way that they would connect to each other?
Yes, very early on writing the pilot. So I'm a millennial, and I was like, I need a Gen Z consultant. And my younger brother, Nick, is Gen Z. And so I would pass him the script and I would be like, what is authentic? What would you say? What would you not say? And he really helped guide me. And then it sort of became an exercise. And like, I didn't want the dialogue to feel overly heavy with terms or slang or language. All of that moves so fast. So I didn't want the show to feel dated at all, but I really just wanted an authentic Gen Z experience and lens. And so my brother was my early on consultant. Then in the writer's room, we had Gen Z writers, and my writer's assistant was Gen Z. And then we worked with a company, a Gen Z company, who read all the scripts and were like, this feels authentic to us, this doesn't. So it was important to me for every aspect of this, for these to feel like real people and not caricatures or stereotypes or poking fun. So yeah, I had a lot of great help.
Yeah. And Lauren, you were bringing up that obviously as the episodes progress and as the storyline progresses for Monica, there's a lot more opportunity to explore the vulnerability that comes through this whole journey of having your entire job yanked away. And I imagine a lot of that also comes with the character rebuilding her sense of what is my identity and who am I if I no longer have this job that has been 24/7 for me. And so how did you go into that space of someone who's trying to figure out and reestablish their identity when they might not even know what that looks like yet?
I mean, I think the experience, I've had such a positive experience as an actor in an ever-changing business. But I think for all of us, just when you think you've understood what the rules of the game are, they are evolving and changing. And I feel like we're living in sort of an industrial revolution of a kind, where the way I came up auditioning or getting jobs or understanding show business is like changed. So there are parallels just naturally to, who am I? Who am I without this job? Who am I with this job? I'm not any. Perhaps there was a time when I was career focused as Monica, so I do understand that sense of like, this is my identity, this is everything. And so I have enough experience to just think about it that way. And then with all characters, I just always want, no matter what sort of tone I'm working in, I want to, what's their beating heart, what's their kind of humanity. And I think she really has a lot. Like none of us wanted to do a stereotype, but this is an archetype, of the sort of like driven working woman of a certain age. And I was just interested in like how to make that specific and fun.
Yeah. And Nico, Doug's obviously also going through this kind of crisis of identity and all of the stages of grief, but it feels like at times he puts himself on the back burner to take care of Monica, even going through all of this. And so how did you separate where you felt like it would exist on the surface for him and where you felt like maybe he's pushing it down or it's just bubbling underneath quietly?
I think it's just in the writing, and like Katie said, it was very collaborative. So, in moments where it didn't feel like that would be the place to separate or put it, we'd had discussions about it. So, yeah, it's just all in the writing. And again, like we've all said, working with the right people gives you the right show.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Good answer. Good answer.
One of the things I loved in the writing as well, Katie, was the fact that you are telling this story of, what has it been like for this woman to come up through the industry, to work for decades, very much probably very often being the only woman in the room and having to adapt into their world. But it doesn't kind of beat the nail over the head repeatedly. There's just little ways that you kind of slip it in, such as there's a point where she describes having had to step over much less competent men for several years. And, that's kind of a way of buoying her own confidence. And so how did you find the ways that you wanted to speak to that experience without it needing to be front and center?
Yeah, I wanted to speak to it in subtleties because, at the end of the day, these are just characters that are exploring and living their lives in this world. And so I wanted it to be part of it because I think it is part of it. And so that's important to me. But I never wanted the show to feel heavy-handed or super messagey or like I was trying to make some kind of point. I just think there's a reality that is still a reality. In my experience of those things still are true. They've gotten much, much better. And there's much more visibility on them and we're talking about it, but there's still a lot of truths to that, that are still coming down in the generations. And then a younger generation is experiencing, like Lauren said, things completely differently, where they're coming, we've done certain things in all lines of work a certain way for a very long time. And I think this generation is coming in with why are we doing it that way? I don't need to do it that way. And it's the first time things have been questioned and people are like, I don't have an answer. That's just how we've always done it. So I wanted Monica to be somebody who's worked really hard, who has been very smart and deservedly has gotten this place. And then Kriska finds herself in a place that she didn't quite deserve and is now tasked to meet that challenge. So I don't know. I wanted hints of it, but I don't know. At the end of the day, I just want people to watch the show and enjoy it for these people and not walk away with like, well, there's a message, I don't know.
No, I think it's great to approach it that way. And, Nico, you were talking earlier about Doug being someone who doesn't necessarily always have that much self-confidence. And as he finds a little bit more of it, how did you want to kind of adapt and evolve the character in the way that he finds this in himself?
Well, you'll see throughout the season, Doug definitely like sort of opens up and finds himself a little bit more. Yeah, so you just do it gradually. And I think episode by episode, there's just a little bit of like a flower blossoming, just a little bit of opening up.
And Lauren, I wanted to ask you about, kind of shooting a lot of the scenes when she's in her home and she's having this kind of breakdown of sorts. And there's a lot of comedy to it. But then again, it all goes back to that vulnerability that you were talking about earlier, because it's a real experience, but that exhibits itself in, I'm day drinking. I decided to get rid of my cleaner and I'm going to vacuum the house, and just finding all the ways in which that expresses itself and getting to kind of really lean into the comedic aspects as well.
It's just so fun. I feel like you know, I just really understand this character, and I just wanted her to be a full person, and so much of the physical stuff I get to do is a really great expression of both sadness and anger and recklessness, which is like a really fun combination. And I get it a couple of times. And I was given some really lovely speeches like here and there, so that, as Katie's saying, you don't want to like hit it over the head too much, that I don't want you to feel she's pathetic. I don't want you to feel she's completely right. I don't want you to feel like it's a mixed bag, as most of our lives and experiences are. And so I just really grew to love her a lot.
Well, I really enjoyed the first few episodes, so congratulations on the series and thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank
so
you very
much.
much.